Okay, so this is an introduction to Adobe Photoshop. As you can see from what's on my screen up here, I am using Photoshop CC 2018. Now we have licenses in the building for the newest versions and stuff like that, but we would like to have the same version on every machine in the building, so not to cause any confusion or problems going from one to another. So it's just such a massive job to switch every computer in the building on the same day to this that it's something we do every couple of years rather than every year because the features aren't that different at the level we're using it at to warrant a change every year for every new version. So you might have 2020 based on the software you downloaded from the links we gave you, but largely it'll look the same. It'll have 99% of the same features, and the 1% is probably something you won't come in contact with. So that might be 3D stuff or something like that. So um, you won't feel any difference from one to the other. And you should be able to bring a 2020 Photoshop file into 2018 and it should be fine. Never had any issues so far. So really what I want to do is kind of go through the Photoshop layout and just get you familiar with all the bits and pieces. And in the next lesson, I'll do a dry run of the retouching um, project that we're going to do. So that'll be a separate video, but I'll just go through this for now. So I'm using it on a Mac. You're more likely to be using it on a PC. Works the same, pretty much looks the same. Up here in the top left corner, you've got your shut it down, minimize it, and full screen version. So I'm going to switch to full screen because that's probably more like what you're used to. And we'll go from there. So when you get into Photoshop first, you've got all of these over here what are called floating palettes that do various tasks and let you control various things and keep an eye on various elements of the thing you're working on. We don't need them all, and I'm going to show you how to minimize that so you can, have it be less intimidating and just have the bits that you need up on screen so as you give more workspace, which is here, to what you're working on. So first thing I always show people is the toolbar. This is down here. If you let your mouse just hover over any one of them for a second, it tells you what it is. It's the move tool. And it gives you a little video of what that does. Fairly self-explanatory. This is the rectangular marquee tool. And now it's going to show you. So just to draw a box over something, and you select that bit in a rectangular shape, and then whatever you do to the image only happens inside that rectangle that you selected. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to show you that if you do this, this is the same as the rectangle one, it's just freehand. So you're drawing it around it in a regular shape. This one is the quick selection tool. So it's kind of, see the way it's kind of detecting the edge of the hand there for you by kind of detecting the edge between one area of color and another. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these. There's lots of them. And each of these tools, think of it as a drawer. If you look there in the bottom right corner of each tool, there's a little white triangle. If I hold that down, it opens the drawer and then there's other tools inside there. So inside the rectangular marquee tool, there's an elliptical or circular one, a single row and a single column for selection. Anyone that has a white corner on it has something inside there. So if I was to say to somebody, so you're going to get your paint bucket tool and you're going to fill in an area with a particular color. So I can't see a paint bucket tool down here, but from using it for so long, I know that in this one, if I hold it down, there's my paint bucket tool, and there it is. Now, this is going to appear pretty much in the way, it might appear pretty much as whoever was using it last left it. But I think we've got it set up now that it resets itself. But it's, as I always say to students, with all of this stuff, finding or remembering where things are is half the battle. Because if you think about it, you've got each drawer here has at least 2 to 3 to 4 other tools. There's a big one, and if you've got paint bucket, sorry, 3 text is right, spinning beach ball. You'll see that a lot on a Mac with Photoshop sometimes. And it can sometimes happen when if you get a bit too enthusiastic with the mouse clicking, like I just did there, and I wasn't being very patient. Uh, it can sometimes you've backed up a bunch of commands, and it just has to work them out. So there you go. So every tool drawer has further tools inside it. Okay. Now, whatever tool you've selected, let's choose the Move tool. You can see up here, this is your info bar, and this is elements that are related to that tool. So this is where you pick the tool. And this is where you kind of can control it a little bit. So you can see here, these are for aligning things. So if you had 3 or 4 objects on your document, you could align them to the center, to the left, to the right. You can transform them, which is scaling and rotating and all of that stuff. So whatever tool you've selected, so if I choose a paintbrush, it says, right, okay, up here is the size of the brush. I can bring up the size. I can also bring up whether it's a hard or a soft brush. And you see up here that's changed into a solid circle where I make it a very hard brush. And down here it gets some kind of fuzzy, kind of soft-edged brush. You know, so different brushes for different, you know, produce different results, you know. If I choose the text tool, for instance, down here, up here, here's the font, the list of fonts that I can pick. So if I choose, let's say, dreaded Papyrus. If you ever look up Papyrus, it's one of those fonts that they say never to use. It's, if you want to know what it looks like, look at the poster for the movie Avatar. That's written in Papyrus. In here is where you could go with a different weight. So this would be regular, this would be condensed, and you can see the difference there. It's a bit more squashed in. This is your font size, measured in points. 72 points equals an inch. And that's kind of related to the old method of printing, like using print press with metal letters that you would line up and paint and then print. And in here is a thing called aliasing, which we'll come to later. And you can line up your text to the left, to the middle, to the right, the color, put your text along a path. And these are elements like for character and paragraph, which we'll come to later. You don't have to know them now. But they're just ways of controlling the space between lines, the space between letters, stuff like that. You know? And again, we'll come to it. So that's this side. Toolbar, drawers inside it, choose your tool that you want to use. Up here is where you fine tune it to get it to do what you want to do, and then you'll work on it in this space here when we've made a document. This side is a bit of a mess. It's taking up a lot of space here. If I was to say to you, these are all palettes, right? And I can see there, I can switch between them, and you see that's highlighted white there. That's the layer that's the palette that's to the front. Now I bring this one to the front. Layers, channels, paths. I find, at least starting, the only ones I tend to use a lot are layers, color, and swatches. So I'm going to take layer and I'm going to bring it up here. And you see the way it goes blue? I let it go, and now those three palettes live together, if you like. So over here in libraries, I'm going to grab this up here. Let's see. Oh no, I don't want to do that. I grabbed the wrong one. Let's reset that. Workspace, reset essentials. There you go. Just bring that back to where it was. So I'm going to grab learn here. I'm going to drag it out, and then I'm going to hit X. I'm going to grab libraries, drag it out, and I'm going to hit X. And I'm going to grab these two, X. And I want layers up here with color and swatches. So they live together. These two can come out and X. And now I've got, I can just grab this here. History will come to. I can grab this here and just move it, give myself a little space. But now I've got all of this workspace to use. This has gotten a lot less complicated. So now I think it's not as intimidating a look as you want to. Unfortunately, we have these set up to reset themselves every time somebody shuts it down and opens it up again. So it's left in a neutral position. But so say if you come back in tomorrow and you open it up, it'll probably look like this. But again, you just go in, grab out the ones you don't want, and after a while, you can actually throw them all into one there, grab all that into one folder. This guy, I'm going to put layers up here, grab this, and go. And then I'm going to just get rid of that one. Now, on your computer at home, you can say workspace, new workspace, and I'm going to call that Will's workspace. And I save that. And then, in theory, my workspace is recorded. And if ever I come back to it, and I'm going to say reset Will's workspace. Hopefully this will work now. I'm going to reset essentials is what I want to do. Oh yeah, I can delete that workspace and go back to the essentials and do all that. But the main point of this is your workspace is recorded, you know. And if I wanted to get any of those palettes back, the ones I got rid of here, they're all in window. So if I go into window and choose, what was one of them? Properties I remember was there. So there it is. There's properties. There's all the ones I deleted. They're all grouped into one folder. And I could take any one of them and put it back in here if I wanted to. So nothing, you haven't lost anything. Nothing has been gotten rid of and has gone forever. So last thing I'll do is we'll set up a document. And we won't do anything on it, but we'll just set it up. And that'll be enough for this one video tutorial. And then we'll move on to the next one. So as with any application, if you want to make a new workspace or a new file, you just go File and New. So new document in Photoshop has broken it down into various different presets. So you can see there's photographic ones like landscape 2 by 3 inches. These are kind of standard sizes: 5 by 7 portrait, 8 by 10 portrait, and 8 by 10 landscape. So wide or tall, whichever way you want to do it. There's print ones. There's art and illustration, which is various poster sizes and postcards. They're just presets that can help you move on a little quicker. Webs, safe settings. Mobile ones, you can see there's an iPad Pro setting, an iPad Retina. Some of these are a little old, but the newer ones will have everything up to date. Legacy iPad, so that's one of the older ones. Film and video. HDTV, 1080p, all of that stuff. So these are different screen sizes working with video. We're just going to go print for today, and I'm going to go to A4, and over here is where I'm going to put in some details. So I'm going to say, you don't have to do this now, but I'm going to say test 1. It's in millimeters. If you prefer to work in inches, you can do it that way. So it's 8.268 wide, 11.693 high, and it's in the portrait orientation, so it's tall. I could switch it. You see the way those two numbers switched around? So now it's a wide image. Let's just stick with the A4 format that we're used to. 300 pixels per inch, right? So that's the resolution. Resolution is how many dots of information there are in a square inch. So this says 300. 300 is the bare minimum you would do for if you were getting something printed in a book or a magazine. This is the resolution you would go with. And at resolutions of 300 and above, your eye can't pick out the individual dots really that are used to make up the image, and it looks, for lack of a better word, it looks real. It looks, it doesn't look like, it looks like a photograph, or it looks like something that isn't poorly printed. If you go below that per square inch, you have fewer dots per inch, and they start to space out a little bit, and you can start to see the dots, you know. So the higher the resolution, the better. If you always saved your work at 300 pixels per inch, you couldn't go wrong, because you can always change it afterwards. But if you're to save it at a low resolution and then said later on, actually, you know what, I needed to start this at 300, but I started it at 72. I'll explain why 72 is the number I chose there in a second. I started it at 72, but I should have started at 300. You can go back and reset its resolution to 300 if you want to. But what will happen is you will end up telling Photoshop to add in a bunch of pixels that weren't really there. So it kind of averages them out. And the thing I always say to students is, if you have say, for argument's sake, a 32-inch wide TV, and you sit really, really close to it, in some ways it'll feel like a much bigger TV. But what you're doing is you're seeing the dots. Do you know what I mean? So the picture isn't as clear. You can make it bigger by getting closer to it, but you haven't made the picture better. You've kind of shown up how few dots there are. So resolution is how many dots of printing there are in every square inch of the image, or how many pixels there are. And it's also an instruction to a printer as to how many dots per inch to print, you know, or how many are available to print. So resolution, there's a couple of key settings. I'll come back to the 72 one. 72 pixels per inch is the resolution of every image you see on the internet. It was agreed decades ago as a minimum standard for internet work. So to make the internet work at any kind of decent speed, it's not so much an issue anymore, but it's a standard that's still stuck to. So 72 pixels per inch is baseline. If you're just putting an image up on a website, when you're building a website, it will be translated to 72 pixels per inch, no matter what you do. So I'll show you what resolution actually looks like in reality now in a sec. But so if you always did 300 pixels per inch, you could not go wrong. And that's why it's kind of a default setting here. It just opens at 300 pixels per inch. You just couldn't go wrong. So my advice to you is just leave it at 300 until you have to change it. And you always want to be changing down. You never want to be scaling up, because it's easier to throw pixels away than add pixels in that were never there. Okay, so we're using color mode RGB, and that just means that we're working on screens. If we were working ultimately to go towards print, we would use CMYK color, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. And all images that are created on a screen are different amounts of red, green, and blue light to make the colors. But CMYK is a different printing standard, standing for cyan, which is a bluish color, magenta, which is a pink, yellow, obviously, and K is black. They use K instead of B for black because B is being used here to represent blue, and they don't want to cause confusion. So CMYK. They won't look that different from each other. And you can switch mid-project. If you start a project in RGB and you go, oh, I should have started this in CMYK, this is for newspaper, you can just go in and change it. And it will, to the naked eye, colors probably won't change that much, but they do change a little bit. And professional printers and stuff like that, they would have color calibrators to make sure that colors are faithful between screen and page. Because if you think about it, your screen is backlit, so it's illuminated, whereas a page is not. It's just a flat thing, and the light is falling on it. In this case, on the screen, the light is bouncing through it. It's lit up, whereas your page is lit on, if you know what I mean. So it's a subtle enough difference, but it can change colors. So let's go stick with RGB, and we'll just create our page. Okay, so I'm going to show you straight away over here, the layers palette has sprung into life. And it's got a layer. It's the background layer, and that's it. That's their base page that we're drawing on. I could choose a paintbrush like I have here. You can see over here I've got a little circular cursor. I'm going to bring up the size a bit, and you can see the brush is bigger now. If I start painting on that, and I know you're pretty amazed by my artistic talent now, but let's say I've drawn that, and you can see over here, I've drawn it on the background. But let's say I want to move that now. I can't really do it because it's painted straight onto the background. So I'm going to undo that. And if I've done, say, multiple mouse clicks, I can just go either undo for the previous one, or I can just go step backward and do step backward a bit at a time. Also, I've got a thing over here called the history palette. And everything I do is recorded in here. So let's say I paint again, right? See, it adds in a brush tool move. Adds in another one. I'm going to change this color. Let's go to red. Adds in another one. And you can see this layer is building up, and these commands are building up here as well. So I can go back and rewind through it, but I can probably only do that to a certain number of steps. So if you're the kind of person who really clicks the mouse a lot, this is going to fill up very quickly, and you can only undo a certain amount in Photoshop. It's not like Illustrator where it's kind of infinite undos in a way within the session you're working. Photoshop has its limits on what it can store, and you can set that to be higher, but it has an implication for the system. It slows it down. So I would say if you make a mistake, get in the habit of trying to fix that mistake straight away. Don't make the mistake, see it happen, and then go, oh, I'll get it later, because you won't be able to undo it. So here's where layers can come in. I'm going to go to my layer menu, and I'm going to say new layer. And I'm going to call this drawing. You don't have to name it, but it is a good habit. So I'm going to enter that. And you can see over here, I've added a layer called drawing. Now when I paint this layer, that drawing goes onto that layer. If I go to the move tool from earlier on, if I click on that and just grab this, I can now move it separate from its background layer. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this drawing blue. So I'll change my color now, and I'm going to change that here. So over here, I can bring it to a different part of the spectrum in this line, and then I choose a particular shade in here. So that's kind of looking more purple, so I'm going to use blue. And now I'm going to go back to my paintbrush over here, and I'm going to draw like that. Okay. So there I've got a drawing blue and a drawing red. Let's double click drawing and put in red and just press enter. So I can switch those layers on and off if I want to, but whatever layer is highlighted in light gray here, that's the one that's active. So the red layer is active at the moment, and it's underneath the blue layer. So the top layer is the layer that's closest to your eye. So let's grab that red layer, and I push it up. You see that blue line appears at the top? I let go, and now they've swapped around the order. And you really use layers to keep elements separate from each other that you want to influence on their own. So if I decided, right, I'm going to get this red layer here and I'm going to scale it. Now, before I do this, I just want to say, I don't expect you to remember any of this after just watching it once. You learn it by doing it, and you learn it by doing it and doing it wrong until you do it right. So there's no pressure. You just try this stuff out and get to the point where you know you're not going to break Photoshop by using it. And then make your mistakes. It's fine. That's what we're here for. So I'm going to go in here, and I've got my move tool. I remember I told you that a lot of the tools were up here, or a lot of the options for the tools are up here. There's one called Transform Controls. And see, it puts all of these handles on it. If I grab it from there, I can scale it. But you see the way it's going out of proportion there? If I hold the Shift key down and drag, it stays in proportion. And then I just press Enter. Or I can turn off those transform controls if I want to. And now I've scaled it independently of the blue one. Let's say I got the blue one now. I've gone to that blue layer. I'm going to turn on my transform controls. I'm going to scale it. And then if I move the cursor, see the way that diagonal means I'm going to scale it. This one means I'm going to rotate it. So if I hold the Shift key down, you see it does it in definite jumps. So if I wanted to just turn it a definite 90 degrees, I could do that. And I'm just holding the mouse and the Shift key at the moment. So the mouse key and the Shift key down at the moment. So let's say I wanted to rotate it on its side. I could go there, let go of the mouse, let go of the key. And then I can just move it. Back to my move tool here. Apply it, yeah, that will do it. And then I can turn off the transform controls. Over here, if I want to bring the blue back to the front, there it is. So one final thing before we go any further, I'm going to save this. So File, I always choose Save As. I don't know why, it just seems to give me more options, I think. So it defaults to a format called Photoshop. If you always save in Photoshop, you cannot go wrong because Photoshop file format will preserve all of your layers. If you were to choose, I'm going to choose a file format that you're more familiar with. If I choose JPEG, it will squash those layers here and here down into, those three layers will be squashed into one, and you won't be able to separate them anymore. So if somebody said, send me a JPEG of that red and blue, or an email to show me that red and blue squiggle design, see how that's coming along, you could save it as a JPEG and send it to them, and it'll be fine. But if you want to get back in and edit your file, you would have to save it as a Photoshop file. So I would do that. I'm going to, on my desktop here, I'm going to make up a folder. So desktop, new folder. I'm going to call it Will Graphics. Okay, create that. In my folder, I'm going to call it test one. It's already there. It's going to go in there. Layers are being saved. Save. This is maximize compatibility, which means that you want to make this usable in older versions. You might as well just say OK. And that's it. It's saved. If you now want to go in and say File, Save As, we can choose JPEG as our file format. We're saving it into the same folder. It's got the same name, but it's a different file format, so it won't save over it. Now, this is where it's asked me how much do you want to squish this thing. So I don't want to squash it. Never compress a JPEG. It's something you don't need to do anymore. It was just something that was done in the dark old days of the internet when people, struggled to attach an image to an email. So never, always bring this up to the top. JPEG compression is very good these days. So I'm going to OK that, and it's saved. So I'm going to quit out of this. If it asks you, do you want to save? You say yes. If it doesn't ask, it's already saved. Photoshop doesn't have autosave, by the way, so get into the habit of saving your work as you go along because it'll eventually catch up on you. So I'm going to open this. There's my folder. You can see I've got two files in there. The Photoshop file is 3.2 megabytes. The test file is less than 1 megabyte at 832 kilobytes. I'm going to preview those. On the Mac, I preview by hitting the spacebar. So that's the JPEG. That's the PSD. You can see it's changed up there. They don't look any different from each other, but the PSD file is editable. The JPEG is a photograph of your file, essentially. It's a squashed layered photograph. You can't access those layers anymore. This one you can. Okay, I think that's more than enough for the first run through. Go through it again, have a look at it. Any issues that come up that you don't understand or you don't get, write that question down and ask me next time we talk. Okay. Thank you.